Today, we are talking about joy. We are in our Advent series, and today is one of the most popular words that we talk about during the holiday season. And so, we're going to be looking at what is joy? Truly, what is joy? How do we define it in our everyday life? And then, how does the Bible define joy? And I am so excited because we have on one of my favorite people. His name is Paul Robie. And I first met Paul when my husband and I were living in Salt Lake City, Utah. And we thought when we moved to Salt Lake that maybe we wouldn't find the kind of church home that we had previously been a part of. And instead, we found the most thriving church in the whole world. And he is the founder. He and his wife, Jenny, church planted, and they founded South Mountain Community Church in Draper, Utah. And that was years ago. And now the church, which is a non denominational church, has 5 campuses and over 4,000 people. And Paul has recently retired 2 years ago. He stepped back from his role there, and he currently serves the Dave and Judy Mast Foundation as a mentor to seminary students. And he also has his own consulting company that seeks to help churches and other Christian organizations fulfill their mission. He is truly gifted in this. And so I'm just going to give him a plug. He did not ask me to do this, but I'm just saying, if you know of a pastor or a church that needs mentoring and consulting services, Paul is the one. He is so smart in all the ways that you want someone to be smart when they're consulting around your church and ministry. And and I was just telling Alex, he's an incredible mix of qualities. And so if you're in need of that, Paul Robie is your guy. So Paul, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Krista. I appreciate you saying those things.
Absolutely. Well, let's just dive in, Paul. I mean, joy is the buzzword around the Christmas season. There is so much talk about joy. There's joy around cookies. Cookies bring us joy, presents bring us joy. But what is the difference between this feeling of joy and the biblical virtue of joy?
Well, one should be more bulletproof than the other, of course. I think that sometimes we can get off in thinking that there's this giant biblical distinction between happiness and joy. There really isn't. Jesus preached his most famous sermon. It's recorded as the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7. And he begins with the topic of joy. And unfortunately, the biblical um, translators felt it was necessary to move away from the word happy to blessed or blessed, right? Because the word translated straightforward is happy are those who are poor in spirit. Happy are you when people say all kinds of things bad about you, persecute you, all that kind of stuff. Happy are the merciful. And so it's easier. It sounds more holy. Um, it sounds more holy to use the word blessed, but for some reason, we've driven some sort of artificial divide between holiness and happiness. And I don't think those things should ever be divided. And so using the word happy, using the word joy should be interchangeable, I think, for a Christian anyway. Um, but what's interesting is that a lot of people don't like that because joy is not a regular experience for them. It is periodic and rare. And so the the feelings of joy obviously can go up and down as tragedy hits our lives and this sort of thing, but and then good things happen, but
Uh-oh.
we're not really talking about circumstantial joy when we're using the biblical concept. We're using something more bulletproof, like I said. And so I think that it's a sustaining attitude of that is surrounded with peace and gratefulness, knowledge that our greatest problem has been solved.
Okay, so Paul, tell us, let's just start by talking about joy, about finding joy in all the Christmas things, from Christmas cookies to Christmas shopping. And yet there's also biblical joy. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, Obviously, the Christmas carols are using joy, the word joy, in connection with a person, and that is Jesus Christ. And the fact that he solved mankind's greatest problem is such a relief, such a joy that he paid the penalty that we should have had to pay. That just causes this feeling of joy or attitude of joy, whatever you want to call it. And because that's something that is one and done, that's forever, that's eternal. It's not based on any kind of circumstances. However, the Christmas joy. If everybody comes to Christmas dinner that you invited, now you can have a smile on your face and be happy and joyful. But when the kids decide they're going to Vegas instead, or they're going to do something with their friends, I'm talking about from a parent's point of view that has grown children. Uh, Man, bad idea to base your joy on somebody else's behavior and their choices. And so
Hmm.
the way the world uses the word often is circumstantial, comes and goes. The way that I think the Bible uses the word is more steady, eddy, foundational to our existence as Christians.
Yeah. So when we think about that, I mean, talk to us a little bit about the different ways the Bible uses the word joy.
Yeah.
And is there a time where it uses happiness? I mean, how do we kind of wade in these waters of discerning, like, what does that mean for us and what did God say
What's
about that?
interesting, yeah, you got Psalm 1 where in the Hebrew, the word happiness is used, the Hebrew equivalent for our word happiness. And then when Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, he said, happy are those of you that are poor in spirit. We call it the Beatitudes. Unfortunately, the translators early on decided that didn't sound holy enough. But obviously, for both the Jews and the Jewish religion represented by the Psalms, and for Jesus as he made life with him accessible to all people, he wanted everybody to know that joy and happiness are available to everybody through a relationship with him. And and so I think unfortunately Christians have decided to draw some sort of false distinction between the two ideas, joy and happiness. And I think that's because very few people really do enjoy that biblical sense of the word. That consistent, non-circumstantial, in a person found, lifetime filled with joy. It's not a constant for them. So it's easier to say, well, joy is a real thing for everybody, but happiness comes and goes. Well, for a Christian, a foundational sense of happiness and joy should be in their life pretty much all the time. It's the baseline of who they are, not something that just happens to them periodically. And so I think there's a weird distinction in some people's heads between happiness and holiness. I think one of the life-changing moments in my life was when I finally figured out that God was more glorified in me when I was happy in him than when I wasn't.
Mhm,
And so obviously happiness and holiness go together. I think it's the greatest
mhm,
advertisement for God for when Christians are happy.
mhm,
I really do.
mhm. Yeah, to consider that for a minute, especially when people can see that our circumstances would determine that we wouldn't be happy.
Right.
That's when it is the most notable, right? That things, I have cancer, or
Right.
my child is not coming home for Christmas because she's not speaking to me, or
Right.
whatever the thing is that somebody can clearly say, you should be unhappy. And we may have feelings of disappointment and grief in that. And at the same time, rejoice that God loved us so much that he came
Right.
and died for us, that the gospel is what we carry with us as our source of joy. And Advent, as we wait for the Savior to return, is good news for us. And how often do I not live my life with that good news being the very first thing I think of in the morning, the thing I carry with me all day long, and the last thing I think of at night? And yet I'm hearing you as my now pastor. I'm claiming you're my pastor right now for this conversation. As telling me, reminding me, that is the definition of my life. So why wouldn't I operate out of that gratitude and joy and good news?
Yeah, I'm glad you put it that way, because obviously we have tough times in our life that it would be phony and inauthentic to paint a smile on our face during certain times. And I don't think that God expects us to do that. Obviously, we have one entire book of the Bible, the book of Lamentations, that was not happy dappy. It was genuine grief and frustration. And that was fine. That was okay. To lament is absolutely godly. But you even read in Lamentations that that person is kind of working through their sadness, and then they get to the point of great is your faithfulness, something to hold on to, that I could return to joy. Even in the book of Job, you see that it kind of takes a 2x4 to the side. God took a 2x4 to the side of the head of Job, so to speak, and saying, hey, dude, you do not get it at all. And once he asked Job enough questions, I can't even remember, there's like 60 something questions or something that he asked Job, and he finally got it. And at that point, he could kind of come out of his stupor and anger and frustration and start to grab onto that joy that's found in a relationship with God. So I really don't want to paint a picture that every Christian needs to walk around with a smile on their face all the time, but we should have the ability to get back to that foundational joy that my greatest problem has been solved. I'm good to go with my creator. And that is a fantastic baseline for our life.
And that's just not a reality that most of us live in. It's just that on the day to day, the moment to moment, when we're caught up in the tyranny of the urgent, when we're caught up in the need right in front of us, we aren't always having that top of mind, front of mind. So what does that look like for you,
Yeah.
Paul? I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I loved it. This summer we had the best conversation when you and your wife Jenny came and visited us. And you said, Christians should be the happiest people on the planet. They should be.
Yeah.
And yet we're not.
Yeah.
Like, this is a problem. We're not. Why are we not?
I think that, first of all, there is a kind of a shallow understanding of the gospel. The gospel, in short, is good news. But when you minimize the bad news, you're going to also underappreciate the good news. And the bad news is so bad that we're far more wicked, far more lost, far more depraved than we ever thought we could be. When you get in touch with that, now when we realize, and as a believer, we're far more loved, accepted, and forgiven in Jesus Christ than we ever could have hoped. When you have both going on in your life, joy is right there. But if you forget the bad news, the good news is, Okay, that sounds good. Kind of, picture me
Hmm.
yawning right now, right? It's just not a big deal. I think a discipline for every believer is to connect with God in the morning or sometime during the day and ask the question, am I joyful right now? Or has someone or something stolen my appropriate joy for today? And and I've
Mm.
allowed it. Nothing can steal my joy unless I allow it. No one can steal my joy unless I allow it. And there's a lot of reasons why people lose their joy. You cannot be joyful and be a victim. All right, those two
Mm.
concepts do not belong together. You cannot be joyful and try to control other people's behavior. I mean, it's just impossible. You can, yeah.
Okay,
I mean, I can go down the list. You just can't.
keep going. That is fire. That is fire,
Yeah,
Paul.
it's just people shoot themselves in the foot. Is what I'm saying. Joy's
Hmm.
available, but if they insist on uh, gaining their value and sense of self from the feedback from other people, that is just going to be a hell of a life and no joy.
Mm.
Yeah,
I keep thinking about people that my husband works with. So he works in a ministry here in Denver for people coming off the streets. And for a lot of people, their faith, maybe it's for the first time, maybe they're coming back to a faith of their childhood, is so electric. They carry that joy and that gratitude with them, even though many of them are dealing with really hard medical things, um, mental health. There's just so many challenges that they are facing. But I think it gets to that idea that you said of they are also very in tune with the dark side of who they are.
right.
Many of them have really done some awful things to themselves and to other people, and they can't hide from it. And they recognize that they're leading their life with the mistakes that they've made, and they know what they've been saved from. And so they live in this life of tangible joy and so
Right.
much gratitude because they recognize, even though other people might look at my current circumstances as hard, I know where I've been and I know that God has literally taken me out of the pit. So then when I compare it to my own kind of vanilla faith that I feel like, like, oh yeah, let's remember to pray at dinner time. Oh yeah, I should say my prayers in the morning when I wake up. It's partly because I can really make my sin palatable
Yeah,
and pretty, and I can get along in life without making other people too uncomfortable, without bringing God into it. And that level of comfort that I can live. So how do I tap into really what I've been saved from
yeah,
if so much of my life is comfortable for other people to look at?
yeah,
Does that make
yeah.
sense?
I like to use this illustration with people. My wife and I were dating at the time. We're in Southern California, just frolicking in the waves prior to getting married. Uh, Loved the sun and surf of Southern California, looking into each other's eyes, lost in love. And boom, this guy shows up. It's a lifeguard, and he's got one of those flotation devices. And we're like, yeah, hello. He goes, you guys realize how far out you are? We had drifted way out because of the riptides and stuff like that and the currents. And he goes, grab onto this, man. We're going back in. And we didn't think we needed rescue.
Hmm.
And so we were fine. And in that just ignorance of what kind of problem we face as human beings, our sin problem. Um, I'm going back to this idea that we need to take time to maximize that problem so that we can get maximum joy out of the rescue. Now, That's hard for a lot of people to do, but it's a discipline. Just like I said, it's a discipline to stop every day and say, how's my joy? Have I let
Mm.
someone or somebody, someone or something steal my joy today? And so, um, one of the great exercises I think of every that I think it's Ann Voskamp wrote about 1,000 gifts or something like that, and she just talked
Mhm.
about how taking time to write all the things she was grateful for was a discipline for her, just caused tremendous joy in her life. And I thought, you're onto something, lady. You got it. So there's different
Well,
disciplines like that that we can do that will help.
yeah. In fact, there's a fascinating research study about that took people who were very depressed and they had them in different control groups and tried these different things. The only in this one control group, the only thing they changed was that they had to do a discipline of gratitude every
Mm-hmm.
day. And I want to say it was for about a month. And at the end of that, out of all the control groups, that group was no longer depressed. I mean,
That
it's so
that is
interesting.
really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But what I also hear you saying, Paul, is that we have a lot of self sabotage
Right.
behaviors. I mean, some of the ones that I heard you saying were, like controlling
Right.
people and being a victim of our circumstance. Like those are just a couple I heard you say. So can you talk more about
Yeah.
that, how we self sabotage our joy?
I think the Apostle Paul gave us a real gift in talking about what it was like to be compared to the other apostles, the super apostles. These guys weren't real apostles, but they had taken up the banner of Christianity and really made a name for themselves. And again, Paul was being compared with these guys. And so he said, look, I don't care. Um, I don't have a high opinion of your opinion of me. And then he said, I don't really even have a high opinion of my opinion of me. The only opinion that
Mhm.
matters is God's. And so, in talking about that passage in Corinthians, Tim Keller talks about self forgetfulness. And I'll tell you, if you're ever going to experience joy on a regular basis, you have to look in the mirror and say, it's not about you. And
Mm.
and the more you can get off of, do people like me? Go into a room. Are there people here like me? Uh, talking to talk to other people, trying to convince them about how amazing you are. Uh, all the things like that. I mean, there's a million expressions of the opposite of self forgetfulness, making a big deal about
Mm.
yourself. But that's part of the depressing life of a victim is they've made it all about them, and they can't
Mm.
do self forgetfulness because they they filter every experience through how it has affected them instead of just being happy for other people. I
Mm.
mean, there here's the ultimate. If you can make it your joy to help others experience joy, you've got it. Like
Mm.
I like it is my pleasure to see you enjoy your life. And I
Wow.
am going to participate in helping that whole thing happen. Now, when you parent, this can get tricky because you don't want to create entitled children, right?
Right.
But
Right.
also, we're supposed to have enough wisdom to know that things don't make kids happy, and Disneyland doesn't make them happy, and
Mm.
new that doesn't make them happy, and all that. And so we have to be wise enough to know how to participate in another person's happiness that really is genuine and isn't, like we said, circumstantial. So, but yeah,
Mhm.
I thought about the best marriages I know about both partners are saying, it's my pleasure to see you experience pleasure in life. It's my joy to see you experience joy. I get so much happiness seeing you be happy and celebrating that and participating in that. So
Hmm.
that's, again, a form of self-forgetfulness.
Hmm. I was thinking about how there is no end when we are seeking our own way and having that, like, just constantly looking at ourselves and looking inward. Like, there's no end to that selfishness. It's just a bottomless black hole that we
Yeah,
could just
yeah,
go on and on and on. Like, there's literally no bottom to it. Whereas when we're trying to lift others up, like, it's a completely different experience inside of us. It's a swelling, and it's like, instead of feeling like the energy is being drained out of us and that it's just like we're just cycling in this bottom barrel, that there's an abundance there that is so different. And that truly, it it builds more joy in us. So if we're looking at this joy concept as something we want to build more of, then that is one way that you just described as a way to multiply joy in
yeah.
our life, to build that joy. And one of the things I heard you talk about this summer, Paul, around a circumstance, I mean, we both were talking about kind of some hard circumstances in our lives, and you were talking about how you build that joy and protect that joy. So can you talk more about that concept?
Trying to think of other ways other than what we've talked about. I think the regular check-in is a big deal for me. Asking that question, have I let someone or something steal my joy? The
Hmm.
gratitude piece is huge. Self-forgetfulness, I think, is absolutely amazing. Uh, I think that I go back to John 15 a lot, where Jesus, of course, talks about abide in me and I will abide in you. And then he gives a new commandment to love each other as I have loved you. And he said, those who keep my commands basically experience this love that I have.
Hmm.
Okay. Then he says, my joy I give to you. He says, I give you my joy. And not only is it that's the important phrase right there. It's not something different than his joy, it is his joy. And so, in the
Hmm.
context, his joy comes to us when we connect with him. Connection is trusting him enough to do what he says, it's participating in this ministry of love toward other people. And then he talks about the kind of joy is the fullness of joy. That your joy might be full, is what he says. And so Jesus wants us to experience the fullness of joy very clearly in that passage. And then right after that, he talks about laying down your life for your friends, and especially, just like he is going to lay down his life for us. It's there's nothing more loving than to lay our lives down for others. And so I piece this all together and have to come out the basically, if you were putting this data into a computer and asking Chat GPT, spit out the results here. What are we talking about? Well, it sounds like the greatest joy is found in expressing the greatest amount of love for other people and getting my eyes off
Hmm.
myself. And it's really this pipeline type of thing, this conduit where God pours in his love, kindness, joy, peace, acceptance. All this goes through me toward other people. And I am just taking it in and extending it out. So if you want a picture, that's what comes to my mind. I am simply giving out what I have received. And that function as a conduit or a pipeline, whatever you prefer, actually spins the wheel of joy in my life. That's where I'm the most joyful, is when I'm actually taking it in and extending it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm cooperating with God's purposes. I'm cooperating with my creation. I've made in His image. I'm made for a purpose. I'm made to glorify Him. I'm made to be an ambassador of His love and to obey His commands. Okay, that's what I'm here for. And I think we experience the greatest joy when we're actually cooperating with the purpose of our creation. Like, why am I here? Answering that question. When we get it
Right.
right, that's the most joy.
And I think for a lot of women, they do find their purpose in loving people,
Yeah.
caring for them, the people right around them. Can you speak for just a minute to the woman who is in midlife, who is maybe listening, who is losing some relationships, or at least losing them in the way that they once were? So you mentioned the kids might be in Las Vegas this year for Christmas, but maybe she's widowed or is separated from her husband. Or the thing we keep hearing from our listeners is part of the pain of this season of life are relationships changing in ways we don't want them to. So if that is our purpose, and we've known in the past, this has given me so much joy, and now I am facing a holiday season where I'm feeling that sever in a relationship that's really important to me. Can you speak to her in her grief in that and the joy that is available to her?
Yeah, I think I start with obviously there are circumstances in life that aren't as they should be. Okay, they're not ideal. They're not even consistent with God's vision for humanity, our lives, the culture, whatever. We suffer sometimes because of sin in the world, and I think it's good just to kind of shake our head and say honestly, I wish it were not this way. That's okay. Um, I like what Scott Peck said in his book, The Road Less Traveled. He said, life is difficult. The sooner you admit that, the easier your life will be. And so if you're going to, like, here's an example. Christmas, my expectations for Christmas are probably unreasonable. It will probably not make me happy like I thought it would. So going into Christmas knowing that all I'm doing is setting myself up for disappointment might be a good start, because it's never ideal. There is nothing ideal in a sinful world. And so now you've set yourself up for joy, because everything that happens that was surprisingly happy or surprisingly good, you get to rejoice that, hey, I'll celebrate that. My kid actually called me on Christmas Day, whatever. It's a good thing. But when you set up all the ways in your mind that other people can fail you, like, if they do that, I'll be so angry. If that happens, I'll be so upset. If that happens, I can't be good with that. All these different ways that now you're self-sabotaging. You're just shooting yourself in the foot. Instead of like, hey, God, whatever comes, praise the Lord, I'm here to serve you. And you know what? If you could put somebody in my path that I could find joy in giving them joy, let's do that. I'm all in on that assignment. Wouldn't that be,
Yeah.
that would be maybe a different approach. Hey, and if you put my kids in front of me, I'm going to be all in on finding my joy in celebrating with them and trying to exponentially magnify their joy. Okay, that would be an amazing opportunity. And so this is a tough time of year for, the starting at Thanksgiving or starting now right before Thanksgiving into Christmas. More people are depressed than any other time of the year. And I don't think it has to be that way because of our foundational joy that comes to us through the person of Jesus Christ. And if that's your foundation going into the holiday season, now maybe you can say, hey, yeah, I hope that we all get together. I hope that this happens. But if it doesn't, I'm good. And I'm going to look for ways to find my joy in the joy of others. That's it.
Yeah, because your happiness isn't tied to that circumstance.
Yeah.
And that's where I was actually just talking about this on someone else's podcast yesterday. I was being interviewed, but I was saying how our expectations literally rob our delight. We
Yeah.
rob it robs the chance that we might be surprised by joy,
Yeah.
surprised by the delight of what happens. But because we're so attached to that expectation that then okay, now I'm not inviting God into what is in the moment. I'm not opening up my arms to, okay, well, God, what do you have for me right here, right now, with these people or this circumstance? Because there is opportunity in it. And it's all in how we're kind of, like you said, either self-sabotaging or setting ourselves up to actually be recipients of joy.
Yeah. There's two modes during this season: waiting around for somebody to make me happy, or getting involved in making others happy. Two
Yes.
approaches. And by the way, I really like the way you summed that up. That's better than I could have said it.
No, you said it so well. And I love that. It's so true, Paul. It's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we close today, are there any resources that you'd recommend or just last thoughts?
Yeah, if somebody wants to take a deep dive into this topic of joy, Randy Alcorn wrote a book on happiness. It's super thick. He actually wrote, I think, a second book where he made it shorter, but it's just called Happiness. Yeah, I mean, the thing is ridiculous. It's interesting to me that Dennis Prager wrote a book. Dennis Prager, PragerU, he's internet guy, and Jewish. He wrote a book called The Serious Problem of Happiness. He doesn't have the same view of Jesus Christ as I do, but he at least addresses the topic as how difficult it is. And he addresses some of the self-sabotaging behavior of people. But I think Randy Alcorn probably has written the most exhaustive thing about this. I just want to say that this is an age-old problem. Plato, Socrates dealt with this problem. And so Augustine actually, I think it's in book 2 of his he wrote one of those books like you read today about what if C.S. Lewis, Sigmund Freud, and Jesus Christ sat down together, and had a discussion. He wrote a long, detailed book, but one of the subjects was joy. So here in the 6th century, he was all into this. It is a huge philosophical problem. And that the problem is, why is it that every single person on the face of the earth wants to be happy? And the corresponding problem is, why are so few people happy? If everybody wants to be happy, why are so few people happy? And so this has been kicked around for 8,000 years, something, I don't know, whatever, a long time. It's an age-old issue. And I believe that God put in us a desire to be fulfilled, a desire to be satisfied, a desire to be happy, joyful, whatever you want to call it, because he put that in our hearts so that only he could satisfy that. We would be the answer
Mhm.
to our deepest problem. So I think it's an important and very deep topic. I really do.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, Paul. This is so good. I mean, literally, like everything that you talked about, it just resonates so deeply with me, and I know it will with our listeners. And so here's to joy. Here's to being the happiest people in the room this season.
That's right, man. We're going to have a joyful Christmas.
Regardless of our
No matter what.
circumstances.
No matter what our kids do.